I'm Greg Sandow, and I'm sitting here with Fergus McWilliam, who is with the Berlin Philharmonic in what I understand to be a dual capacity. That is, you play the horn, and you also have an administrative position.
Yes.
This is correct.
This is correct, and I'm not the only one in that position. Quite a number of us, in addition to our musical and performing responsibilities, are also heavily involved in the self-direction of the orchestra and the various committees that we have in place to do that.
Okay, so this, from the point of view of an orchestral musician in America, is almost not to be believed. I mean, we understand that the Berlin Philharmonic is an orchestra run by musicians, but in the American orchestral world, this basically just doesn't happen, so people probably can't imagine what it's like. What is it like?
Well, the first question that most people will put to us, and quite understandably, is isn't it a lot of work? And the simple answer is yes. It requires a great deal of our time, in our free time. We don't generally get ourselves excused from any of our artistic responsibilities. We still have to play the full schedule of concerts and rehearsals and attend auditions and so forth. But we do our committee work in the free time in between. We are also, though, it's important to recognize that we do have a management. We have a fully staffed, a very large administrative and technical staff, numbering some 80 in all, because we run two concert halls. The Philharmonie, which is the big concert hall, and the smaller chamber music hall. Each keep not only our own productions going on in there, but when we're not performing, we rent out these spaces to other guest performances, other orchestras, chamber music ensembles, all sorts of productions. And it's part of our overall budget. And we have to run these buildings, we have to have staff to operate, to run these concerts and so forth. So there's quite a large administrative, technical and administrative side. There has to be, of course, a management associated with that in order to run the nuts and bolts of our operation.
So I guess the question then arises, what is the difference between the management musicians like yourself do and the management that the paid staff does? You said they do the nuts and bolts. Does that mean you do the leadership, the planning, the direction?
Yes, more in principle than in fact, because the time available to us is restricted. Therefore, we have learned how to delegate a lot of the authority which resides in the orchestra to make these decisions. We delegate them to professional management. Naturally, this professional management has a significant disadvantage. They have to look over their shoulders from time to time, wondering what the players are thinking of the things they're doing. To be quite honest,
I could add, you know, that in America, I imagine that the management looks over their shoulder, wondering what the musician's thinking of what they're doing and having no way to find out most of the time. So maybe
I don't think that's the case with
I think
our management learns very
exactly.
quickly how well they're doing. If they're perhaps too proactive, they'll hear about it, and if they're also too reactive or too passive, they'll hear about it. But should a position be unfilled, and a case in point has just recently been applicable. For the last 3 years, we have not had a general manager, a CEO. We call it an Intendant in Germany. And we've been looking for 3 years. Some of you may know that we've very successfully recently discovered and engaged, to our great delight, Mrs. Pamela Rosenberg.
Right.
And
former director of the San Francisco Opera, but before that of opera companies in Germany.
That's right. And for all this entire period, we've been running without a CEO. So not much point delegating work to a CEO when you haven't got one.
This is the truth.
So we've been doing that work ourselves.
So describe then what exactly it is that you do and how you happen to end up holding this position. Were you elected to it? Did you volunteer for it? A combination of both?
I was elected to, first of all, be a member of what is called the Personal Committee. The Personal Committee, or Workers' Council, is a committee that's mandated in Germany for every place of employment. It's almost unique in the world, I think. It's a model that the other European nations are beginning to follow. It's seen as quite radical by the Anglo-American business world and as quite essential in the Germanic one. This committee is made up of representatives of all the employees, not just musicians, also from the administration. And we have an extraordinary amount of authority to interject ourselves into management decisions. to block and prevent certain issues from actually coming about if we feel that either labour law hasn't been followed, or the interests of the employees have not been accorded due respect, or to protect individuals in their contractual relationships. We look after issues revolving around worker safety. It begins to sound in the Anglo-American model a little bit like a union. Well, we're not in fact the union at all. We're simply, like every other place of employment with over 50 employees, the mandated committee has to exist. No one can be employed without the approval of this committee. No decision can be made like firing somebody without the approval of this committee. On the other hand, the committee sometimes has to involve itself on the management side, taking a position against a possible employee. So that it's a bit of like a Solomon's committee all the time.
I guess a question that might arise is, does every orchestra then in Germany over a certain size run the same way, or is there something that sets the Berlin Philharmonic apart?
Well, this particular committee is not unique to Berlin Philharmonic. It's a standard across the entire nation. To describe the end of my role is that as chairman of this committee, then I sit on the board of trustees of our foundation. That's mandated by the law that says that whoever the chairman of this workers' council is, they sit de facto on the board of trustees, the fiduciary board, with a vote as well. And that's the large part of my committee work, the largest part. Other things I've been involved with, though, is chairing up the negotiating committee for master agreements. I was on the search committee for the new intendant. I sit on another board of trustees for a subsidiary that our foundation has, and a few other things I can't remember.
They're hard to keep track of.
Ask my wife; she knows where when I'm not at home.
But now, what sets the Berlin Philharmonic apart from other orchestras in Germany?
Oh, I think we have a lot in common with other orchestras in Germany. It's a good question whether we are more different and more similar. I would say we are more similar.
Well, maybe the similarities, maybe the most important thing are the differences between what you do and what orchestras here in America do.
They were getting closer.
There we're getting closer.
It might be in the German context, the difference between the Berlin Philharmonic and another orchestra in Germany might be a matter of degree, a degree of intensity, if you will. But the underlying structural elements are in some way or other common. You can find them in most of the other German orchestras, perhaps not as fully developed as they are with us. Also, we've been at this since 1882 in various legal structures. We had to adapt all the time to changing external political environments, and always found a way to survive. But the essential element of the orchestra's foundation in 1882 was an act of rebellion. In 1882, the members of a private orchestra run by a guy called Bilse, basically, rather than having a strike, they just resigned, they just quit to found their own band. And it was for commercial reasons and for artistic reasons. They wanted to be able to play better or have better conductors, and they wanted to make more money. They thought they could do that better running the place themselves. And you know what? They were right. Mm-hmm. They did.
And even to this day, one of the things that certainly sets you apart from any American orchestra I know of is that you, all the musicians, choose the music director.
Yes, well, this is where we get to the bigger differences between our model and particularly the Anglo-American one. As I remember, the United States, it was the board who chose the music director, following the old analogy, whoever's paying the piper calls the tunes. Certain logic to it, of course, who could argue that? Except where we are, somebody else is paying the piper and we call the tunes. It's a lovely paradox. Well,
the someone else who pays the piper is the German government, traditionally, or yes, the Berlin city government.
Berlin is a city-state and enjoys a double status as a municipality and as a state within a federal structure like here in the United States. It has state authorities and state taxing powers and so forth. They do pay a significant part of our budget, and something over 40%